Good afternoon. It's great to see everyone here. It's my great pleasure today to pay tribute to perhaps the most significant man of the 21st century, George Mitchell. Right now, to give this some immediacy, George Mitchell's foundation is shepherding, along with a couple other nonprofit organizations, including the Aspen Institute, rewrite of the Texas fracking regulations. And this involves everything from the very technical aspects to dealing with the personalities of the boys from Midland, the traditional independents down in the trenches. George Mitchell was the son of a man who herded goats in Greece, and when he got to the United States, ran a shoe shine shop. I think this speaks for the quality of opportunity available in the European countries at that time. And when the Mitchell family arrived in the United States, young George took immediate action to access the opportunities presented here and became a quintessential American success story. He worked in the oil fields as a teenager, became entranced with it, and worked his way through Texas A&M, somehow finding the time to graduate number one in his class. When he left Texas A&M, he didn't go with a major to do an apprenticeship, which is the way a lot of our industry has lived. Instead, he joined an independent, a small independent that eventually became Mitchell Energy. That company made the Barnett Shale into the first shale program in the United States. It took 20 years, a lot of determination, a lot of money. And then in the early 2000s, George sold it to Devon for $3.2 billion, which enabled him to be a billionaire at least twice over. This is one lifetime. Along the way, 35 years ago in 1978, George and his beautiful wife, Cynthia, started the Cynthia and George Mitchell Foundation, which has since then given away more than $400 million to medical research, the arts. It's at the nexus of and most importantly, it's at the nexus of environmental and social policy. George had one thing that he wanted the industry to do and think about, and that was to do our job right. He foresaw what would happen when we moved in and started drilling hundreds of wells in small communities and conducting frac trucks and conducting frac jobs that lasted for days and involved hundreds of trucks. He realized how this would change the industry, how it would change its impact on the communities, and how it would change the need for us to work even harder on our social license to operate. He also gave a large amount of money and helped to restore the city of Galveston, where he spent his childhood. I had the good fortune to meet George, I believe it was in the 1970s, at the Aspen Institute, where we were both taking a seminar on the humanities from the Institute in the format founded by Mortimer Adler, as far removed from the rough and tumble of the oil business as could be. But it fascinated him because of his intense love of his fellow man and his ability to be a student of human nature. I saw him off and on in Aspen, but didn't see him for quite a while. Things that I think George would like people to know, to remember him for, are his environmental commitment, doing it right, and he foresaw the economic gain that could come from this for society. He did not patent this technology. He gave it away freely to his fellow industry members. Think of the money to be made if he had patented it. He did not do that. Some insight into George and his family. There were certain paradoxes about George. He was for reasonable population growth. He worried about overpopulating the world and the ability of the earth to sustain its population, and yet at the same time he had 10 children, 10 delightful children, and now many, many grandchildren. Recently, in fact, Sunday night, one of the Mitchell boys, Todd, was talking to his children, explaining that it was time for them to know that their grandfather, Poopaw, had a few differences going for him that most didn't. And one among those was he was worth a little more money than they thought, than they ever suspected. And he talked about his success as a businessman, as an oil man, and the various things that made George so special. He wanted his kids to start to know and understand more about their grandfather. The 11-year-old boy looked up at him and said, "Dad, Grandpa always helped everybody." That was all this 11-year-old boy knew, and that was all he really cared about. From the mouths of babes comes a wisdom unparalleled. Yesterday, in the mail, I received my August 3rd edition of The Economist magazine, published in London and really an international magazine of business and society, and a thought leader as far as I'm concerned. On page 58, it devotes an entire page to recounting Mr. Mitchell's life. They stole a lot of my thoughts, they stole a lot of my lines, but they put it out there for the world to understand what a significant human being Mr. Mitchell was. Their last line is, reconciling the tension between Mr. Mitchell's twin passions, fracking and sustainability, will be one of the great problems for social scientists to resolve in the coming decades. But one thing is certain: the revolution he started by poking holes in the Texas dirt is changing the world just as surely as the algorithms being generated in Silicon Valley. I started this talking about Mr. Mitchell as perhaps the most significant human being of the 21st century. He's lowered the cost of energy in the United States. He's going to, and we will eventually lower the cost of energy around the world. We'll guarantee the next 95 years, or 87 years, of reasonably priced energy, available energy, to the world and its emerging 1.5 billion population who wants to participate in modern civilization. We'll facilitate the development of other forms of energy, such as renewables, perhaps nuclear. And in the meantime, we'll keep the economies growing and emerging. Africa can emerge. We'll provide the energy for them to do so. George Mitchell created the future of this industry, a vibrant future. We were a disappearing industry 4 or 5 years ago, something to be written off, and nobody in the right mind would think about going into the oil and gas business as a future career. That's all changed. Mr. Mitchell provided tremendous service to the world and to the industry. As members of this industry, we can all walk an inch taller because of the way he lived and what he's done for us.